The air above the water was different, sharp, filled with 1,000 new scents I had never known before. I had no voice to scream. I couldn't call out. The witch had taken it in exchange for these legs that made every step feel like fire. The pain was searing, as if a knife was splitting me from tail to toe. I saw him approach, a large, grizzled man with eyes hard as stones. His skin was worn from the salt and wind of the sea, and his lips twisted into a cruel smile when he saw me.
Well, what do we have here?
I wanted to speak, to explain that I needed his help. I only had 3 days to find the prince, to kiss him, and seal my fate as a human forever. But I couldn't make a sound. I reached out, pleading with my eyes. He laughed, a low, wicked sound that sent shivers down my spine.
Can't speak, huh? That's fine. I don't need words from a catch like you.
I tried to scramble away, but my legs, my new cursed legs, were weak and unsteady. Before I could escape, his hands were on me. They were rough, tearing at my skin. I wasn't a princess here. I wasn't even a person. I was just another piece of meat in his catch. When he was done, he dragged me ashore, then the town, straight to a market where people bought and sold lives. He handed me over to the highest bidder. I was trapped in this world, with legs that hurt and a voice that was lost. I once dreamed that the human world was beautiful and admirable, but it seems I was mistaken. They took me, bound my wrists, pushed me into dark corners, forced me to carry heavy stones, to work until my body was covered in bruises and welts. Even my legs burned from the brand they seared into my skin, punishing me. They were once a symbol of my dream, had become a curse. They didn't see me for what I was, a lost soul searching for love. They only saw a thing to exploit. Days passed, or maybe it was only hours. Time had become a blur of pain and exhaustion. And then I saw him, my prince. He was there, walking through the market, his golden hair catching the light. I had found him. My salvation was right in front of me. If I could just get to him, if I could kiss him, this nightmare would be over. I stumbled forward, my legs barely holding me. But before I could reach him, hands grabbed me, yanking me back. I was thrown to the ground, beaten for daring to approach royalty. I cried silently, tears mixing with the dirt on my face. They chained me, binding my feet together, and I couldn't even run. My legs, once my dream, had become my prison. Later, when they released me, I found myself staring out at the ocean. The waves called to me, whispering of home, of the freedom I had once known. I wiped away a tear. I had thought being human would make me happy. But it was not as it seemed. I didn't have much time left. The 3rd day was nearly over. Soon I would return to the sea, tail and voice restored. And then he was there. The prince! He approached me, touched my shoulder. His eyes filled with kindness, confusion.
Are you all right?
This was it. The moment I had waited for. The kiss that would make me human forever. I leaned forward, desperate to kiss him, to end this curse. But before our lips could touch, rough hands grabbed me once more. The guards pulled me away, slamming me to the ground.
How dare a slave touch the prince?
They shouted. The blows came fast and hard, my body racked with pain. And then it happened. Before their eyes, I felt the transformation begin. The legs that had caused me so much torment melted away. The delicate scales returned, shimmering in the dull light of the setting sun. They gasped in horror. I was no longer a woman, no longer a slave. I was a creature from the depths, a monster in their eyes.
A human with a fishtails!
Someone cried.
A beast!
Kill it, and the prize is yours.
I couldn't believe I was hearing those words from the person I had been waiting for all this time. The crowd turned on me, their faces twisted with fear and hatred. They descended like wolves, tearing at me, fighting each other to claim a piece of the prize. "Please," I cried, my voice hoarse. I begged, but they didn't hear me, or they ignored me. My body once again at the mercy of those who saw me as nothing more than an object to be used, a curiosity to be destroyed. They beat me, their hatred pouring out with every blow. I felt bones snap, skin tear, but I didn't fight back. I had no strength left. From afar, I saw the prince standing there. He did nothing. And then he smiled as they tore me to piece. And then the darkness swallowed me whole.
I watched in horror as the nurse called for help. 2 other staff members rushed over, lifting the boy's unconscious body from the chair and carrying him out of the room. My heart pounded, breaths shallow and ragged, and the room fell silent. Now, it was my turn. The nurse, her face calm and composed, turned to me. The sound of her approaching footsteps echoed in my ears. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as she neared, the metallic clink of medical instruments reverberating through the room. The acrid stench of alcohol flooded my nostrils, sharp and overwhelming, making my stomach churn. She snapped her gloves into place, preparing for the injection. I tried to take deep breaths, but each inhalation seemed to shrink the space around me. The nurse pulled a fresh needle from its sterile packaging. My eyes locked on the thin, gleaming object. And then it happened. As she lifted the needle into the air, my mind betrayed me. In one horrifying instant, I saw it flying towards me, not at my arm, but straight into my eye. The shiny point seemed to pierce the air itself, and a scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. I clutched my face, pressing my palms against my eyes, convinced the needle had already impaled me.
Miss, are you okay?
The nurse's voice broke through my panic, but it was distant, muffled, like I was underwater. Her hands were on my shoulders, gentle but firm.
Hey, you're okay! I haven't even started yet.
I pulled my hands away from my face, blinking rapidly. My eye wasn't bleeding. There was no sharp pain. I was fine. It was all in my head. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and gave her a shaky nod, though my heart still raced, and my skin felt clammy.
Deep breaths, all right?
The nurse said softly, her voice soothing. She resumed her task, though now I could see the concern in her eyes as she approached me more cautiously. The needle glinted again, but this time I forced myself to stay still. My arm felt cold as she swabbed it with alcohol, the sensation spreading like ice across my skin. I braced for the worst, every muscle in my body tense. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then came the needle. The sharp sting broke through my fog of dread, and the sensation traveled up my arm, leaving a strange numbness in its wake. I stared at the tube connected to the needle, watching in horror as the dark red liquid was slowly drawn up, drop by drop. My body felt weightless, as though every ounce of blood was being drained from me. I couldn't move. When the nurse finally withdrew the needle, I barely noticed it was gone. But then, the needle had broken. I saw it! The tip of the needle was still lodged in my arm, protruding from my skin. My breath caught in my throat and panic surged through me once again. Blood sprayed from the wound, splattering across my face. I gasped, my hands shooting up to cover the spot, but the pressure only made the blood flow faster, coating my hands and dripping down onto the floor. The nurse didn't seem to notice. She calmly wiped my arm and placed a bandage over the wound, her hands steady and detached.
All set.
She said, stepping back with a polite smile.
You can go now.
I sat there frozen in place. Couldn't she see what was happening? My blood was everywhere. The needle was still inside me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was already walking away. I stumbled to my feet, my vision swirling, and I made my way out of the room. The hallway seemed endless, and my legs felt weak beneath me. When I reached the exit, I couldn't wait any longer. I ripped the bandage from my arm.
Just keep calm, babe.
I woke up with a sharp pain shooting through my back and shoulders. My entire body felt like it had been through a fight, but I couldn't remember anything unusual happening during the night. As I struggled to sit up, I noticed the dark bruises blooming across my skin. I had no memory of falling or hurting myself in any way. "Stephen!" I called out, my voice trembling. He rushed into the bedroom, concern etched on his face.
What's wrong?
He asked, his eyes scanning over the bruises on my arms. I showed him the marks. "Look at this. Did something happen last night? I don't remember anything." Stephen looked just as puzzled as I felt.
No, nothing happened. I was right here beside you the entire night. Are you sure you didn't fall out of bed or something?
I shook my head, feeling more confused than ever. I hadn't moved from the bed, that much I knew. Stephen helped me get dressed, and we decided it was time to see a doctor. The doctor ordered a full set of tests, checking everything from my blood pressure to potential vitamin deficiencies. When the results came back, everything appeared normal, except for one thing.
You tested positive for nitrazepam.
The doctor said, frowning at the report in his hands. That can't be right. I've never taken any kind of sedative in my life.
Are you sure? It's a strong drug, typically used to treat severe insomnia or anxiety. You haven't been prescribed anything like that?
I shook my head, my mind reeling. No, doctor. I wouldn't take anything like that without knowing. He looked concerned but didn't press further. When I got home, I saw a small pile of papers on the table. Stephen had left some of his things scattered about after sorting through bills and documents the other day. Then something caught my eye. A prescription slip, crumpled slightly at the edges. My breath hitched in my throat as I picked it up and read the name. Stephen. For a moment, I felt a pang of concern. Could Stephen be struggling with some kind of ill? Why he hadn't told me? Maybe he'd been suffering in silence, trying not to worry me. But why? Curiosity gnawed at me, and I decided to search online for more information about the drug. As I read through the details, my heart began to pound harder. The dosage prescribed to Stephen was far higher than what was typically recommended for mild insomnia. It was the kind of dose that could knock someone out completely. The most surprising thing to me was that the main ingredient of the drug was nitrazepam. An unsettling thought crept into my mind. Could Stephen have done this? Was he drugging me? The idea seemed absurd, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The way he had looked at me this morning, calm, almost too calm, left a knot of unease in my stomach. I sat there staring at the screen, my thoughts spiraling into darker places. Was I just being paranoid, or was something far more sinister happening right under my nose? That night, as Stephen handed me my usual cup of chamomile tea, I hesitated. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for me to take a sip. My heart pounded in my chest as I forced a smile and took the cup. But instead of drinking it, I waited until he left the room and poured it down the sink. I knew then that I needed proof, something to confirm what my instincts were telling me. That evening, after Stephen had fallen asleep, I set up a small camera in our bedroom, hidden among the books on the shelf. I needed to know what was happening while I slept. The next morning, I could barely contain my anxiety as I reviewed the footage. For the first few hours, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I watched myself sleep peacefully beside Stephen. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding as the footage played out. My body, twisted and unnatural, crawled up the walls like some kind of grotesque creature. My breath caught in my throat as I watched. Stephen woke up looking up at me without a hint of surprise. He reached under the bed and pulled out a stick, using it to fend me off as I lunged at him from above. For the next hour, the two of us wrestled violently, though Stephen seemed to be the only one truly fighting. Finally, he managed to pin me down and cuff me to the bed, his face a mask of grim determination. The marks on my wrists suddenly made sense. The bruises, the pain, they were all because of this. I had been attacking him in my sleep, possessed by some force that I couldn't understand. I hadn't known. I hadn't realized it wasn't Stephen hurting me. It was me. Whatever dark force had taken over me at night. Tears streamed down my face as I rushed to find him. "Stephen! Stephen! I'm so sorry!" My voice cracked as I called for him, but there was no response. I searched the entire house, my heart racing faster with each passing second. The kitchen was empty, the living room quiet. "Stephen!" I screamed louder, panic rising as my voice echoed through the empty rooms. Where could he be? I checked the bathroom, the study. Nothing. The house felt unnervingly still, as if I were the only one left in it. My stomach twisted with fear. Something wasn't right. Then, I remembered the bedroom closet. I hadn't checked there yet. My hands shook as I reached for the handle, a sickening feeling growing in the pit of my stomach. Slowly, I opened the door. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the monster.
I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like it was ready to leap out of my chest. The nightmare still clung to my mind like a thick fog, vivid and real. My hands were trembling as I scrambled out of bed and rushed to the bathroom. I stared into the mirror, holding my breath. There I was, just Mia. Just the girl everyone admired, the one with the perfect skin, the perfect smile. Relief washed over me, and I couldn't help but laugh, embarrassed by how shaken I had been. It was only a nightmare, I reminded myself. Nothing more. Later that day, I met Jen, my best friend. She was always the calm, collected one, never letting anything faze her. When she saw me, though, her eyes narrowed in concern. Jen pointed to my chin.
There's a pimple. You should treat it before it gets worse.
I blinked in surprise and quickly pulled out my pocket mirror. Sure enough, a small red bump had appeared on my chin. I hadn't even noticed it until now. I frowned, confused, as she handed me a small tube of acne cream.
Mia, you should put this on.
I thanked her, embarrassed, and promised to use the cream as soon as I got home. By the time I was back in my apartment, I slathered the cream on before bed, expecting it to clear up by morning. That's how it always worked, right? A simple fix. I had no reason to think otherwise, but when I woke up, my skin felt strange. It itched, burned even. My hand flew to my chin and I froze. The bump wasn't just a bump anymore. I rushed to the bathroom, hoping it was just a bad reaction to the cream. But when I looked in the mirror, I wished I hadn't. My face was a nightmare brought to life. The once small pimple had spread, covering my chin with inflamed welts. They weren't just blemishes anymore. They were moving beneath the surface of my skin like they had a life of their own. Thick, yellow pus oozed from the edges, mingling with streaks of blood. I could barely recognize myself. In a blind panic, I grabbed the cream Jen had given me and smeared it across my face, desperate for relief. I applied face masks, cold compresses, and anything I could think of, but nothing helped. The more I treated it, the worse it became. The welts spread, consuming more and more of my face until it felt like I was rotting alive. I started avoiding mirrors, terrified of what I might see. But even when I wasn't looking, the reflection found me. My face, twisted, grotesque, staring back at me with hollow, bloodshot eyes covered in festering sores. It was everywhere. In the phone screen, on the surface of the water, and also in the window. I tried covering every reflective surface I could find, but it didn't matter. My reflection was always there, haunting me, reminding me that there was no escape. One day, I decided to get out. I pulled on a hoodie covering my head and decided to go to the grocery store. I thought if I just avoided looking at mirrors, I might feel normal again. For a moment, I almost did. I even stopped to pet a small, fluffy puppy sniffing at the sidewalk. Its big, brown eyes looked up at me, and for a moment, my heart softened. I knelt down to pet it, needing some kind of comfort. Then, I saw it, my reflection in the dog's eyes. Through those innocent eyes, I saw a monster. My skin swollen and rotten, deep gashes across my face. The thing in the reflection wasn't me. It was something out of a nightmare. I pulled away, horrified, and ran all the way back home. I locked myself in my apartment, trembling and crying. I curled up on the floor, tears streaming down my face, unable to shake the horrifying images of my reflection. This couldn't be real. That night, in my darkest moment, I made a decision. I had been running from the reflection for too long. It was time to confront it, to fight it. I marched into the bathroom, heart racing, and stood in front of the mirror. My face, if I could even call it that, stared back at me. The welts had grown even larger, grotesque lumps pulsating under my skin. Blood and pus oozed from the edges, dripping down my hands. "I'm not afraid of you!" I screamed at the thing in the mirror. I lifted my hand, and in a fit of rage, slammed my head into the mirror. The glass shattered, blood splattering across the broken shards. The creature in the reflection bled too. I could see it, its grotesque face twisted in pain. This was it. This was how I would defeat it. I smashed my head into the mirror again, and again, blood pouring down my face. The creature in the reflection was weakening, its movements sluggish. It was dying. Before I collapsed, I saw it. The creature, bleeding out, fading into nothing. I had done it. I had won. I smiled, triumphant, as I struck the mirror. One last time.